This episode of Capes and Lunatics is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. Get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
Me hearties, and welcome once again to Full Stream Ahead. I'm your captain, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is me first mate.
It's Mozz.
My skinny rich friend. Glad to have you aboard. Tonight's episode, the penultimate episode of I'm Not Okay With This on Netflix. Like father, like daughter. Season 1, Episode 6. Sid worries she's being followed. Anxious and determined to get closure about her father's death, she searches the basement for answers. Jonathan Entwistle, of course, is our director on this. Christy Hall got the teleplay this time. Of course, John Entwistle and Christy Hall both get developed by credits on this show. And, of course, Charles S. Foreman, as Charles Foreman, created the original comic book upon which this is based. Okay, and this story opens up, how does this open up? This is just...
It's with Sid and Stan looking at the video footage from the library.
That's right, yes. So they're watching the library. And
can you enhance it?
Yes. Zoom in and enhance. Zoom in and enhance. Yes.
It kind of gave me shades of the Punisher and what's the dude that helps him?
Chip.
Data?
Microchip.
Micro. Yeah. It reminded me of Punisher and Micro.
Yeah, except less so.
Right. But I mean, that's what he's trying. He's trying to be the helper guy, the guy in the ear.
And I get that, and it's delightful.
Yeah, the other thing that I kind of liked about the beginning couple of scenes with Sid and Stan, when they're sitting in the car and he says, you can tell me anything, and then she doesn't really know how to talk to people really well. She doesn't know how to manage her emotions, so she tries her best. And it always ends up, she gets, whirled up into her emotions, and it comes out in anger and in, rudeness or whatever. But he sort of sits back and says, okay, that's just how she likes to communicate. She's opening up. Let me not, so he doesn't jump on her right away. It's only after several situations where she's overly rude to him. He's like, all right, listen, let's take a step back. What's up? But I appreciated the fact that he let her communicate how she wanted to communicate,
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, Stan gets the hardest working man in show business award for this show. Just that he is so willing to put up with everyone else's baggage. And for what it's worth, in its own way, it's kind of almost a little disturbing, because it is like he just really wants this connection. He wants a real friendship,
Right, yeah, but it's also... It's not... Yeah, I mean, it is for that, but it's also being approached in the best possible way. Mm-hmm. The healthiest, emotionally way.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can look at it and work around it and, observe it and think about it, but I don't want to overstate the real difficulty that I feel like Stan goes through in this, and for what it's worth, yeah, all of these kids are going through a lot, I mean, for what it's worth, as much as we like to point out, that Brad is a douche. Yeah, he's a douche, but he's also a guy who's sitting here watching what Stan said at the start of this, which is like, this is the height of his life. This is the best it's ever going to be. And it's really sinking into him. And it's eating at him. And he's sitting here dying inside. Because I think, the problem with Brad, I think, is that he's just smart enough to know that he's never going to do more. And when you look at his friend, I believe his name is Barry, or his last name is Barry, who's the other star football player, who he knows is going to do so much better than him. And because his friend is a harder worker, and for what it's worth, his parents have a nicer house. So, they probably are in a better position. And you can see Brad just seeing, where does my life go next, and how do I get out of the problems that I have, and will I ever be able to do that? And of course, when you're an 18-year-old kid, you don't even know how you might approach that,
Yeah, I don't know that I got the sense that he is thinking that far ahead. To me, he's just like a petulant child who's just, again, like everybody else, except for Stan, maybe just ruled by his emotions, and he can't see past the next moment or the last offense against him. So I think he just embroiled in that. How dare she do this to me, and blah, blah, blah. I'm the star quarterback. I think he's still caught up in that. I don't think he sees that far ahead in his life, or that it matters. I think that's still so open-ended that it doesn't need to be defined in his mind yet. He's still a child. And I think he's simply just saying, oh, how could this happen to me? And he's just incredulous at this, and he's offended. And I think that's that's how I read it.
No, and I'm not going to say that's wrong. But I think on some level for him it is. I think it is. Maybe I'm overseeing it. Maybe I'm overreading it. But I guess in my mind, I feel like, yes, there is this childish petulance to it. But I do think that the reason, and when you look at his friend, who, as I say, is clearly going to do better than him in life. Whatever he's going to do, it's going to be better than what Brad's going to do, most likely. Well, definitely better than anything that Brad ever accomplishes later. For those who've watched ahead, but it is just this reality that, he's starting to realize that everything that he had counted on to open doors for him are starting to fall apart. Because, as soon as he hurts his ankle, there's no special treatment for the benched star quarterback. You know what I mean? There's no special treatment once the thing that made him great is gone. And this, for what it's worth, this is actually something, you see it gets revisited. It got revisited a lot in sitcoms back in the 70s, where it happened to Chachi, and, where once they weren't sure his knee was going to heal, that suddenly all the scholarships dried up, and everything that might have paved a way forward for him, kind of flittered away. They did that's basically a story on Good Times, where basically the sister, I want to say Velma, was going to marry a star running back until he breaks his leg, and then he doesn't get to play pro ball, and it goes all downhill from there. And that it's a very sad story. It's a very sad arc. He becomes an alcoholic. If those of you who remember that arc on Good Times, they were not good times. Named Good Times, somewhat ironically named. But yeah, so this idea of a person who is coming to terms with the fact that they aren't going to achieve something beyond what they have is, I think, and like I said, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I do see this frustration that he's feeling, and even if I don't excuse it, I maybe understand it, and that's the thing, you can understand someone's frustration without excusing it. As an example, I understand why Sid doesn't want to explain everything to Dina, but I don't excuse it. I think that had Sid talked to Dina in the way that she should with the person she feels is her best friend, But then again, from Sid's point of view, it's like, if I were honest with this person who now suddenly did seem popular, would that just make her shut me out more? Would I be too much of a pariah for her to deal with?
Well, that, and it's like, that's one of those things you can't tell anybody. And, it's the mistake that every, character in fiction makes, is opening that first door to invite misfortune into your life. Yeah. Is by letting that first person, and she didn't want to let Stan know, but he does know, so might as well use the asset that you have to try to figure this out. But, I think I understand where her point is. Like, when she says, I really can't, I was impressed with her that she stood her ground.
I know.
And, even though all the social pressure was for her not to.
But I guess what I'll say is, and yes, this is a constant thing that every, superhero goes through. As they say, it's self-created. So, like, just recently I was reading this, because, no comic books right now, so I'm getting all these old issues from my comic book store, because I still want to read comic books every week, and I want to support my local comic shop. And I pulled out this issue of Marvel Tales from 1967, and literally the whole story is, it's your typical Peter Parker, I can't be Spider-Man because Aunt May needs me too much. And then the very end of it is actually Aunt May just basically telling him, quit wallowing in your own self-pity. And just focus on what's important. I'm not, made of glass. And, we all have our obligations we have to deal with. And in this way, I feel like, if Sid, or if Peter had just been honest with Aunt May, instead of assuming she was made of, spun glass, and that the slightest shock would send her over the edge, if he had been honest with Aunt May, she would have been a much stronger asset to him. But he made her a liability because he refused to acknowledge that she could handle it.
Yeah,
so
but
she made that choice that this person couldn't handle it. Now, granted, yes, like Sid, Peter's a 16-year-old kid and doesn't have that emotional maturity to understand other people's emotions because they can barely understand their own.
And how could he? How could he possibly? After having gone through what he did with Uncle Ben, he'll do everything, sacrifice his own self to protect her at this point. So, I think, especially at 16, how could you expect him to?
Well, yeah, but, I guess, here's what I'll say. It's like, if I gained superpowers, I would tell my wife.
Right. But if
but that's because I'm an old man who suddenly gained superpowers, and I'd want to connect with the people that I trust.
And you didn't have somebody die because of your superpowers or your lack to use them, or your dynamic with how you view those superpowers in relation to yourself.
Well, possibly, but then again, at the same time, neither is Sid right now. So,
right.
So right now it is just sort of.
Although that's the one thing that she constantly worries about. I think this episode starts with, "Dear Diary, maybe I'll just stop talking and I'll stop hurting people."
Yes, and that is her worry, because she does have this worry about her, and we do see. Because as we see, a lot of what this episode is going to be revealing at the end is. What is the family secret? And that is the real crux of the biscuit. Is this family secret that as we get at the end, she finds out that, and again, it's these things that, it's hinted at up until this point. We know that her father killed herself. And she goes into the basement, she finds the puzzle pieces, she's picking them up, and she's just trying to say, if only he had left a note. She's doing this whole scene in a much more frantic version of the scene that she had done earlier when she, first went down there, when she killed the hedgehog. It's kind of this whole thing, and then she sees her father's footlocker. and she pulls out the footlocker. And this is actually the most interesting point, is this is the first time we actually see her want to use her powers and use her powers.
And focus them into a laser as opposed to just a explosion that the energy dissipates in every which direction.
Exactly. It is very focused and directed and accomplishes a specific task.
Yeah.
A little bit destructively. Well, see, that's actually an interesting. I don't know if she actually broke the lock or if she simply opened it. And that's an interesting question on that, because we see the lock, it's rattling around, it's bumping back and forth, and then all of a sudden it turns and unlocks. Or it comes off of it and it flies off of it. So we don't know if the lock just snapped and flew off, or if it actually opened up and then flew off. So it's an interesting thing, as a question as to how exactly her powers were working. But whether she unlocked it or she actually did break it, it's again just focusing tightly on that one thing to achieve that one thing. And when she does open it, this is where she finds, I believe, she sees her, she starts seeing her father's military effects. Finds his dog tags, sees he was awarded a medal. I don't know what medal that was. It's got an anchor on it, so it's clearly a Marine medal. But I don't think it was a Bronze Star. And we also, as she's going through all this, as she's trying to understand what's happening, that's when her mom comes down and basically has the big heart-to-heart with her daughter about her father that, and again, maybe she should have had, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And that's because even adults have a hard time. And then, of course, it's the adult who thinks their child may be made of spun glass. And said, I don't want to damage what my child has.
Yeah.
By telling her this deep, dark family secret. And what we get is the deep, dark family secret is that her father somehow survived an attack that literally killed everyone. Everyone in his platoon, all of the enemy, and all the civilians. An entire town.
I get the feeling that he was the attack.
Yeah. I do think that is, well, let me put it this way. That is certainly the implication. You
think that's the implication the mom is making, or the implication
No.
the
That's the
writers are making?
implication that the story is making.
Gotcha.
I don't think the mom, because not for nothing. I don't think the dad ever told his wife, yeah, I don't know, man, I think I got superpowers, and if I get angry, I blow stuff up. I don't think it's. I think again,
as much as she knows, or as much as she knows about what he was going through, it seems like he probably made an attempt, but it was so far out of the realm of possibility that she just compartmentalized it in her mind as, oh, that's just the PTSD.
Well, yeah, and for what it's worth, there's a scene early on in this series where when Sid first smokes pot with Stan. And suddenly she's calm. And suddenly she's not blowing up. And they make the point that her father was a pothead. That her father was always smoking the pot. And you get this idea then later when the mom is saying, anytime I really try to push him on this, he'd just storm out of the room. And she thought that was avoidance, which it is a level of avoidance, of course. But at the same time, it is also a reality that he knows if he gets pushed again, something bad could happen.
Yeah.
And he uses the marijuana expressly because...
I guess they mirror that same sentiment with...
Go on.
They mirror that same sentiment with Sid and Stan, where she blows up at him at the table, and the orange juice container on the table starts vibrating, and she's like, okay, let me get myself under control, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and that's the thing is we do see Sid in this episode starting to control herself. Which is, for what it's worth, no spoilers in this, which is why I think that the scene we see at the end of next episode, I'm not convinced that's Sid. No spoilers on this.
Oh, how interesting.
I'm actually thinking there's something else there that the ending of next episode sort of feeds us into, but that's your teaser, listeners, for next episode. So make sure you tune in 1 week to the next episode of Full Stream Ahead, because we're going to talk about that episode.
Yeah, this whole time I was thinking that the thing following her was her father, but now I'm thinking it's probably the thing that got her father, too.
I think, again, we get something with that thing next episode, and I don't want to spoil it.
Right.
But yeah, you know, of course, that's the first thought is, oh, it must be her father. But then again, it comes into the secondary question, why do we assume that? Why do we assume because she's missing something that... It comes into this quality of we don't know what is, you know, we know as much as Sid knows, and Sid knows nothing. And this, I think, is the always the risk whenever you're trying to put the pieces together. When you, for what it's worth, when you have a effectively unreliable narrator, that, you know, Sid is an unreliable narrator in her own right, because she is a teenage person who is very overwhelmed by the stresses of her life, and for what it's worth, she has a lot of stresses in her life, and, you know, the qualities of where she's coming from, you know, to have this other burden laid upon her is very overwhelming. You know, for what it's worth, the reason why I'm a little more judgmental of a guy like Peter Parker is that at no time do we ever get that anyone in his family was ever anything but 1,000% supportive. You know, that these were people that were always trying to work with him and protect him and help him through his problems, not just dismiss them. And this is where I find myself with more sympathy for Brad, because for what it's worth, we have not seen anything of Brad's life.
Right.
His father could be as bad as Stanley's.
Yep.
Which, you know, as we've seen from The Breakfast Club, if any of us have seen it, you know, that's the shtick. It's like, oh no, actually my dad's an abusive jerk too. We all have abusive parents. Yay, the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
I feel like even Christopher Nolan's Joker took inspiration from that movie.
Oh.
You want to know how I got these scars?
Yeah. Oh, Christopher Nolan's Joker was a very good Joker.
Indeed.
I actually like Christopher Nolan's Joker a little bit better than the latest Joker.
Yeah, I mean, I like them equally. I think they were amazing in different ways.
Yeah.
I can't really, if pressed for it, I can't really choose. Yeah. I mean, like, when I first saw it, I didn't think there could be a better Joker, but when I saw this Joker, I was like, maybe I was wrong, but the fact that I question it is the only answer that I guess that you need.
Well, you know, and this I think is the crux of any of this kind of genre fiction, is that the more you're given, the more it gives you reason to question the authenticity of the person, of the narrator. So when we look at Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, because we're given these facts that now we get to dissect, and now we get to say, well, wait a minute. Was this really the right way you should be, or are you using your mental illness as an excuse for your bad behavior, or is your bad behavior the result of your mental illness? And there is a real difference between those two possibilities, where, you know, the things you're doing are because you are mentally ill and can't control yourself, or the things you are doing are because you're a bad person, but when anyone asks, you just say it's because of your mental illness. Get closer if you want to be on the mic, Tristan. Mm-hmm.
That's a great point, Tristan.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, well, we talk a lot in this family about the difference between psychopathology and sociopathology, because we do like murder shows in our house. Oh, and whether or not Cletus Cassidy is a sociopath or a psychopath. The differentiation between the two, just to give you the quick layman's back of the envelope differentiation, is that psychopathology usually implies a dissociative quality with reality, where sociopathology is simply a willful disregard for other people's sentience. You know. Yeah. I don't know if you can hear him or not, but
barely.
Yeah, so he's saying that, sociopaths only care about the people that they care about. But of course, that's a very transactional relationship as well. Because of course, the second that someone fails in achieving as soon as someone fails being worthwhile for that love, then you no longer love them. Tristan is showing me his S1E6 drawings. He's got a purple man and is that a pink Bonnie? Oh, a yellow Bonnie. Okay. Yeah, there's a whole issue now about pink man and purple man, and you're not bothering, but for those of you who are into S1E6. Yeah, you get because it's purple guy in S1E6 and purple man in Marvel Comics. So, anyway, where was I, Mozz? So it's okay. So so that's my take with Brad. Is I do wonder what his home life is, because we are almost aggressively never shown it. We see everything, especially by the final episode, about Stan's home life, especially in the sense that Stan's father was, in some essence, a Brad of his own day, you know, and that I think is a telling quality of it.
Yeah, and there's what sets Stan apart from the rest of them, because he's had a tough upbringing, and I'm sure he's ruled by the same emotions as everybody else, and maybe has some of the same, mental, shortcuts that aren't the most helpful in his mind. But he's found a way to work around them and still be a healthy member of society.
Well, that's, I guess the counter argument to that is that he also never woke up with the ability to kill hedgehogs with his hand.
No, but neither did Brad. Neither did, all these other people.
Well, yeah, but what it comes down to is this idea that, so for example, you take Brad, who had one thing for which he was rewarded, and perhaps inordinately rewarded for it, and maybe because he did that was when he got love. And so in this way, Stan, because he doesn't have that, never imagines a world where his father loves him. This is like, my favorite line from The Great Gatsby. And I think it's from The Great Gatsby, but it's basically when Nick goes home, and he says this thing to remember, that says, when he leaves Minnesota, he goes to New York, he says, I want you to always remember, not everyone has had the advantages that you have had. And on one hand, that's just your basic, not everybody grew up in a solidly middle-class family in turn of the century America, which was a big deal. No deny it. Nick got great education. He didn't really want for a lot in his life. He got to go to college. He got a lot of opportunities that most people didn't. But there's also a quality to that, which is that he had a loving home. And the value of a loving home is as much an advantage that so many people never get. That when you're looking at them and you're judging them and you say, well, you never had that. There's a great thing the Superior Spider-Man arc, which is one of the things I love, where you get this idea that Otto Octavius and Peter Parker were actually super similar as young men. The difference was that, whereas Peter had Aunt May and Uncle Ben that gave him love, Otto always had a family that disregarded him. And, at best, smothered him and then manipulated him for their own gains. Exactly. So in that way, you create a world where, and again, where I judge Peter Parker a little more harshly, because it's like, Peter, Aunt May can handle it. Why do you hide this from these people that you know? What is your excuse for doubting these people instead of trusting these people when you've had this love your whole life? And for what it's worth with Sid, I think throughout her life, her mother has loved her. I think her father has loved her. Yes, her father has left the family in a tragic way, arguably abandoned the family, but still, you would think that might cause her to have a deeper relationship with people, not to push them away. But, choices get made, and not everyone has had the advantages that I've had growing up, and I need to remember that.
Yep.
Okay. Any final thoughts on tonight's episode, Mozz?
I think this episode end with the diary missing, or?
Oh yes, that's our big reveal.
Right.
Because she's going, and what I love about that is that it is so stream of consciousness, where she's thinking about what she's going to write in the diary. It's like, dear diary, what a day, diary, where she's calling out to it, and diary is missing. And what I love about that is we're not going to find out where diary is.
Not today.
Not today, no. And not until much later next episode. And it's not even really presented as a mystery, which I love about it. But when we get to the next episode, it's almost like it's almost forgotten, which is weird in its own right. But then again, for what it's worth, kids lose things all the time. And probably, the most likely outcome is, probably got put in Lost and Found.
Yeah, but her secrets are a bit more dangerous than most.
This is true. And that's why you and I, thinking out, not being teenagers and, aficionados of the genre, might see that worry. But the fact of the matter is that worry is in and of itself something that's manufactured by the overall perspective that we have. Whereas if you were just a teenage kid who wrote a bunch of stuff in her diary, because again, and no spoilers, but when we get to the actual big reveal, that's not even the biggest, that's not the biggest bomb to be dropped, The biggest bomb to be dropped are really all the petty little things. And so, the lack of worry that it'll turn, the view that it'll turn up in time, is a little more understandable in that structure. But we'll get to that next week. I hope we've wet your whistle, kids. I hope you're all rushing out right now watching episode 7, because this is a really short series, only 7 episodes, 22 minutes each. If you haven't binged it already, what is wrong with you? But I hope you guys are all finishing it up and really did enjoy it and are going to come back here next week to talk to me and Mozz about it, because we're excited about it. I know I am.
Oh, boy.
And Mozz, if they'd like to talk about it with you before our next episode airs, how can they find you?
Oh, they can argue with me on Facebook or via email. You can reach me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And, of course, we do have sponsors here. Tweaked Audio, makers of fine headphones, which you can listen to our podcast on. High-quality items, which you can look for. Tweaked Audio, ask for it by name. And, of course, Hunt a Killer, which is a delightful product that supports us, where you get to solve murders in the privacy of your own home. And
Ooh.
who wouldn't want to do that? And, of course, always scroll down, find that Amazon link, and find all the stuff that you are ordering right now. And, give a nickel to Rob and 3 cents to Phil. And me and Mozz will say thank you for it.
Indeed.
Okay, and then if you'd like to talk to me about all the wonderful things you found, you can do so in that old-fashioned email way, the way our Mozz and Paz once did. At superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. Of course, follow me on the Twitters as I live tweet Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's coming back, and they're going back in time, and wackiness is about to ensue.
Didn't they already do that?
No, they went forward in time last time.
Ah, gotcha.
See, they established time travel, then Tony Stark figured it out, too, in his own way, And now they're reverse engineering it, because big secret of the MCU, Fitz is smarter than Tony Stark. Mark my words.
All right, let's take it easy.
At Charlie Esser, that's CHARLIEESSER. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
For quality. Ding!
Thank you, Mozz. All right, ladies and gentlemen. All right! Yeah, landlubbers, me hearties. Thank you for joining Super Connectivity. No, this is Full Stream Ahead. Thank you for joining us on Full Stream Ahead once again. Hop aboard next week and sail off with us as we learn the final secrets of I'm Not Okay With This on Full Stream Ahead.
Yeah.
Arr.